The triple-canopied forests of Draxion Prime stretched toward the horizon like a vast green ocean. The air hung heavy with moisture, punctuated by the occasional flash of bioluminescent insects darting between massive tree trunks. It was the perfect place to die, Lieutenant Maritaiko thought, surveying the landscape from atop a ridge. Perfect, because no one would ever find your body. Lieutenant, perimeter sensors are operational. Sergeant Kai Ver approached his uniform, already soaked with sweat, despite the cooling filaments threaded through the fabric. Though I don't see why Command bothered sending us here at all. There's nothing on this rock worth protecting. Tycho nodded absently, her eyes still scanning the tree line. Hydra Battalion No. 9 had arrived on Draxion Prime 3 standard cycles ago, with orders that made little sense establish a forward operating base to protect a peripheral sensor station that by all accounts monitored nothing of value. 150 soldiers of the Galactic Alliance's least prestigious logistics tactical battalion, assigned to the middle of nowhere. Maybe that's the point, Sergeant, she finally said. Maybe they just wanted us out of the way. Ver's expression darkened. The rumors again, ma'am. The rumors. Every soldier in Hydra had heard them by now. Unlike other battalions which recruited based on combat experience or technical expertise, Hydra had been assembled using genetic criteria that no one quite understood. Endurance beyond normal human limits. Tissue regeneration rates that defied medical science. Adaptive capabilities that allowed them to function in environments that would kill ordinary soldiers. Just focus on getting those sensor arrays calibrated, Ver. Whatever Command's reasons, we have our orders. As Ver returned to his duties, Tycho couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Not by anything in the forest their bioscanners would have detected any life forms larger than an insect, but by someone far away studying them like specimens in a laboratory. In the command center of the Galactic Alliance's capital, a holographic display showed the deployment of forces across 27 systems. Fleet Admiral Jeremiah Roth gestured toward a tiny blue dot at the edge of the projection. They've reached Draxion Prime without incident, he reported. Initial readings are promising. Across the table, Marshal Eric's metallic fingers tapped impatiently against the polished surface. Half of his face was organic, weathered by decades of warfare. The other half was a seamless composite of synthetic materials, the result of an assassination attempt 15 years ago. I still think this is a mistake, Eric said. Playing with human genetics like this. We're creating weapons we might not be able to control. They're soldiers, not weapons, Roth countered. And they're still human. Are they? Eric's organic eye narrowed. The genetic modifications we've made were necessary, a third voice interrupted. General Soban Harker stepped into the light, his medical officer's insignia gleaming on his collar. The Zelkar don't fight fair, Marshal. They use biological agents, adaptive tech, environmental manipulation. We needed soldiers who could withstand those tactics. And if these adaptations progress beyond our expectations, Eric asked, what then? Harker didn't answer. He didn't need to. All 3 men knew the containment protocols that would be enacted if Hydra Battalion became a threat rather than an asset. For now, Roth said quietly, we watch and wait. The attack came 3 weeks later without warning. The Zelkar had been driven to the edges of Alliance space years ago, their once mighty empire reduced to a handful of renegade battle groups. But what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in technological superiority and a willingness to employ tactics that the Alliance considered unconscionable. The first indication of their presence was a localized electromagnetic storm that knocked out Hydra's long-range communications. By the time Tycho realized they were under attack, 3 defensive positions had already been overrun. Report, she shouted, ducking into the command bunker as explosions rocked the perimeter. Lieutenant Lena Rhodes, their intelligence officer, looked up from her tactical display. Her dark eyes were wide with disbelief. It's a Zelkar battle group, ma'am. At least 300 combatants with heavy support craft. They've already taken the eastern approach and are moving toward the sensor station. How did they get past our early warning systems? They didn't, Rhodes replied. They were already here using some kind of adaptive camouflage. Our systems never detected them. Tycho's mind raced. 300 against their 150, and the Zelkar had the advantage of surprise and superior weaponry. According to standard military doctrine, their position was already lost. But Hydra wasn't a standard battalion. "Sergeant Ver," she said, "how's that biological radar system you've been working on?" Ver looked up from his console, surprise evident on his face. "The one using native insect pheromones to track movement. It's experimental at best, ma'am. I've only run simulations." "Deploy it," Tycho ordered. "Right now, and get me squad leaders Quan and Mercer. We're going to try something unorthodox." Within minutes, Tycho had outlined her plan. It was reckless, borderline suicidal, and violated at least 6 Alliance combat protocols. It was also their only chance. The Zelkar commander, a tall, spindly being with translucent skin that revealed the complex network of organs beneath, watched with satisfaction as his forces advanced through the human defenses. These primitives were no match for Zelkar biotechnology. Their weapons could barely penetrate the reactive armor his soldiers wore, while his disruptors cut through human flesh with sickening efficiency. "Forward units report minimal resistance," his second-in-command reported. "The humans appear to be retreating to their central compound." "Predictable," the commander hissed through his breathing apparatus. "They always cluster together when threatened like prey animals seeking safety in numbers. Press the advantage. I want that sensor station secured within the hour." But as his forces pushed forward, something strange began to happen. The forest itself seemed to turn against them. Swarms of bioluminescent insects descended on Zelkar positions, their tiny bodies somehow interfering with targeting systems and environmental sensors. Areas that scanned data had shown as solid ground suddenly gave way, plunging soldiers into hidden sinkholes filled with caustic mud. And the humans fought like no Alliance forces the Zelkar had encountered before. They moved with uncanny precision, as if they could predict where attacks would come from. When cut off or surrounded, they didn't panic or surrender as expected. Instead, they adapted, using the environment in ways that shouldn't have been possible without extensive prior training. In the central command pod, the Zelkar commander watched in growing alarm as his tactical display showed more and more units going offline. "What is happening?" he demanded. "These are simple logistics troops." Unknown commander. His science officer replied frantically, analyzing sensor data. "But we're detecting unusual neurological patterns in the human soldiers. Their response times are accelerating, and there's evidence of heightened sensory perception, particularly in low-light conditions." "Impossible. Humans don't have those capabilities." "These humans apparently do." 3 hours after the initial attack, the unthinkable happened. The Zelkar forces began to retreat. What should have been a simple operation to capture a strategic location had turned into a bloodbath, their bloodbath. Of the 300 Zelkar soldiers who had begun the assault, fewer than 200 remained combat effective. Lieutenant Tycho stood at the edge of the compound, watching as the last Zelkar transport disappeared into the clouds. Her uniform was torn and blood-stained, her left arm supported by a makeshift sling. Around her, the survivors of Hydra Battalion were already beginning to refortify their positions, moving with the efficient precision that had saved their lives. "We lost 23, Rhodes reported, handing Tycho a datapad. "Another 35 wounded, but Dr. Harrison says most will be combat-ready within days." "Days?" Tycho looked up sharply. "That's not possible. Some of those wounds would take weeks to heal." Rhodes' expression was unreadable. "That's what I thought too. But it's happening, ma'am. And it's not the only thing. The troops who were exposed to Zelkar biological weapons during the attack, they're not showing any symptoms. It's like their immune systems adapted on the fly." Tycho felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Keep this between us for now, Lieutenant. I need time to think." As night fell over Draxion Prime, word of Hydra Battalion's improbable victory was already spreading across Alliance networks. In the sterile conference rooms of the Capitol, military strategists pored over fragmentary combat recordings, trying to understand how a logistics tactical unit had repelled a force twice its size. And in his private chambers, Marshal Eriks reviewed the medical data from the battle, his expression growing grimmer with each passing moment. The genetic modifications were advancing faster than expected. Hydra wasn't just adapting to environmental challenges, they were evolving in response to combat situations. They were becoming exactly what he had feared: unpredictable, potentially uncontrollable, and undeniably effective. "The experiment continues," he murmured to the empty room. "God help us all." The next 6 months transformed Hydra Battalion in ways that even its architects hadn't anticipated. After the defense of Draxion, Prime High Command began deploying them to outposts that other units had written off as indefensible: a research station on the edge of a gas torus, where atmospheric toxins could penetrate standard respirators; an asteroid mining colony threatened by radiation storms that could fry neural implants; a derelict navigation beacon drifting through a region of space where the laws of physics seemed to bend unpredictably. In each case, Hydra not only survived, but prevailed, developing tactics that confounded both their enemies and their own commanders. They called it the Hydra Protocol, a fluid, adaptive approach to combat that leveraged their unique capabilities and turned apparent weaknesses into strengths. When standard communications were jammed, they used modified biorhythms to coordinate attacks. When enemy forces deployed sensory overload weapons, Hydra soldiers could temporarily shut down specific neural pathways, rendering themselves immune. When conventional weapons failed, they improvised using materials at hand, displaying an ingenuity that bordered on prescience. Lieutenant Tycho watched these changes with a mixture of pride and growing unease. Her soldiers were accomplishing the impossible, saving lives, securing vital assets for the Alliance. But at what cost? "They're not telling us everything," she confided to Rhodes one night, as they reviewed mission data from their latest deployment. "High Command, I mean. These assignments, the way they're testing us, it's like they're trying to find our breaking point." Rhodes nodded, her expression solemn. "I've been pulling data from the medical bay. Our recovery rates are off the charts even for severe injuries. And there's more." She lowered her voice. "Some of the troops are developing new capabilities: enhanced night vision, increased sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. One squad can communicate almost telepathically in combat situations." "Is it affecting their psychological profiles?" "That's the strange part. They're still stable, more stable than regular troops exposed to similar combat stress, actually. It's like whatever changes are happening, they're happening in harmony with their basic humanity." Tycho thought about this for a long moment. "Keep monitoring the situation, and Rhodes, let's keep this between us for now. If Command gets wind of the full extent of these adaptations, I don't know what they'll do." But secrets were hard to keep in wartime, especially secrets as potentially game-changing as Hydra Battalion. In the Alliance capital, the debate over Hydra's future had reached a fever pitch. Strategic Command was divided into factions: those who saw Hydra as the future of warfare, a new breed of soldier capable of adapting to any threat, and those who viewed them as a dangerous aberration, a potential fifth column that could turn against their creators. Marshal Eriks led the skeptics. "We've created something we don't fully understand," he argued, during a closed-door session of the Strategic Council. "These soldiers are developing capabilities beyond our initial parameters. They're operating with increasing autonomy. They're becoming a separate class of human." "They're winning battles," Admiral Roth countered, "securing objectives that would otherwise require 10 times the manpower. The Zelkar are on the defensive for the first time in a decade." "At what cost?" Eriks demanded. "We're talking about fundamental changes to human genetics, changes that could be passed on to future generations. We're creating a caste of super soldiers without any ethical framework for their existence." General Harker, who had overseen much of Hydra's development, remained conspicuously silent during these debates. As Hydra's chief medical architect, he had more data than anyone on the battalion's evolution. But his reports had become increasingly vague, full of technical jargon that obscured more than it revealed. In private, Harker was conducting his own investigation, one that even his fellow commanders didn't know about. The genetic modifications in Hydra Battalion were indeed progressing faster than expected, but not in the way anyone had predicted. Rather than creating mindless super soldiers, the changes seemed to be enhancing qualities that were already fundamentally human: adaptability, empathy, cooperative problem-solving. It was as if the human genome, when pushed to its limits, had chosen to amplify what made humans unique, rather than turning them into something else entirely. The implications were staggering. If Harker's analysis was correct, Hydra Battalion represented not a deviation from humanity, but its potential future, a glimpse of what humans might become through directed evolution. But before Harker could present his findings, events overtook the debate. The Zelkar, stung by repeated defeats and desperate to neutralize the threat that Hydra posed, launched a coordinated offensive against multiple Alliance outposts. Among their targets was Kestrel Station, a vital supply depot, where Hydra Battalion had been sent for what was supposed to be a routine rotation. The Zelkar attack force was massive, 10 capital ships supported by fighter squadrons, and drop troops all under the direct command of Marshal Ericks himself. It was an overwhelming display of force, designed not just to destroy Hydra, but to erase any trace of their existence. Lieutenant Tycho received the news with a strange sense of inevitability. She had always known this day would come, the day when the Alliance would decide that Hydra Battalion was too dangerous to exist. "They're coming for us," she told her officers gathered in Kestrel Station's tactical room. "Not to test us this time, to eliminate us." "On whose authority?" Ver demanded, his normally calm demeanor cracking. "We've done everything they asked. We've won battles no one else could win." "That's precisely the problem," Rhodes said quietly. "We've become too effective, too unpredictable. They're afraid of what we might become." Tycho studied the tactical display where the approaching Zelkar fleet glowed an ominous red. 10 ships against 1 station defended by a single battalion. The odds were impossible. Perfect Hydra odds. "We're not going to die here," she said, her voice steady. "And we're not going to let them turn us against each other. If Marshal Ericks wants to see what Hydra Battalion is capable of, we'll show him. But on our terms." The plan she outlined was audacious, even by Hydra standards. Instead of barricading themselves within the station as expected, they would use Kestrel's unique architecture against the attackers. The station's myriad maintenance tunnels, designed to allow repair crews to access its outer hull, would become infiltration routes. Its communication array, capable of broadcasting across multiple frequencies simultaneously, would become a weapon of information warfare. And most daringly, Hydra would deploy its newest capability, a biological network that allowed soldiers to share sensory information in real time, effectively seeing through each other's eyes and coordinating with uncanny precision. "It's never been tested at this scale," Ver warned. "The neural load could be dangerous." "More dangerous than being vaporized by Zelkar disruptors?" Tycho asked. "Besides, Sergeant, I thought experimentation under fire was our specialty." As the Zelkar fleet moved into attack position, Marshal Ericks stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Implacable Justice. Through his synthetic eye, he tracked the movements of his forces with cold precision. This would not be a battle so much as an execution, regrettable but necessary. "No communication from the station, Marshal," his communications officer reported. "They're maintaining full lockdown protocols." "As expected," Ericks nodded. "Begin the assault sequence. I want surgical strikes on their defensive emplacements first, then target their life support systems. Force them to evacuate." But as the first wave of fighters closed on Kestrel Station, something unprecedented happened. Instead of the expected defensive barrage, the station went completely dark, all external systems shutting down simultaneously. To sensors, it appeared as if the entire facility had suffered catastrophic power failure. "A ruse," Eric's said immediately. "They're conserving power for a counterattack. Maintain course." Then, just as suddenly, the station's systems came back online, but in a pattern no one had anticipated. External lighting pulsed in sequences that disrupted targeting algorithms. Communication arrays broadcast on frequencies that interfered with fighter coordination. Even the station's waste disposal system seemed to be venting gases in patterns designed to obscure critical structural points. It was as if the station itself had become an extension of Hydra's battlefield awareness. Fighters are reporting targeting system failures." Eric's tactical officer reported, voice tight with tension. "And we're picking up anomalous readings from the station's outer hull, some kind of biological signature spreading across the surface." Eric's leaned forward, his organic eye widening. "Biological signature, explain." "It appears to be a neural network, sir, using the station's external sensors as nodes. It's adapting to our attack patterns in real time." Inside Kestrel Station, Tycho and her officers maintained their connection to the biological network, their minds linked in a way that made them more than individual soldiers. Through the network, they could feel the station as if it were an extension of their own bodies, sensing stress points, redirecting power, coordinating defenses with millisecond precision. "First wave of fighters is pulling back." Rhodes reported, her voice strangely distant as she divided her attention between physical reality and the network. "They lost 6 craft without scoring a single direct hit." "They'll adapt," Tycho said. "Eric's won't give up that easily. Prepare for the second phase." The second phase was even more daring than the first. Using the maintenance tunnels, small teams of Hydra soldiers had positioned themselves on the station's outer hull. Now, as the Zelkar capital ships moved closer to deliver their killing blow, these teams activated devices that Ver had engineered specifically for this confrontation: quantum entanglement beacons that could temporarily merge with and disrupt the Zelkar's shielding frequencies. For exactly 8.3 seconds, an eternity in space combat, 4 of the Zelkar ships were completely vulnerable. Kestrel Station's defensive batteries, previously silent, opened fire with devastating accuracy. Precision strikes targeted propulsion systems, weapon emplacements, and command nodes. Not to destroy Tycho had been explicit about that, but to cripple, to demonstrate Hydra's capabilities without crossing the line into massacre. On the bridge of the Implacable Justice, alarms blared as damage reports flooded in. 4 ships effectively neutralized in a single salvo. It was unprecedented, impossible, and terrifying. "They predicted our attack sequence perfectly," Eric's second-in-command said, voice shaking. "It's as if they were in our command network." "No," Eric said quietly. "It's worse than that. They've developed a new kind of battlefield awareness, one that operates on instinct rather than computation. Pull back the remaining ships. Regroup at Rally Point Delta." "Sir, we still have overwhelming numerical superiority. If we press the attack, we'll lose," Eric's finished for him. "They've already countered our primary strategies. Each additional attempt will only provide them with more data to adapt to. No, Commander. This battle is over." But there was one more phase to Tycho's plan, the most dangerous and the most necessary. As the Zelkar fleet began its withdrawal, she severed her connection to the biological network and made her way to Kestrel's primary docking bay. There, a single shuttle waited, its engines already warming. "Lieutenant, what are you doing?" Rhodes appeared at her side, face pale from the neural exertion of maintaining the network. "If you're thinking of going out there—" "Someone has to," Tycho said firmly. "We've shown them our capabilities. Now, we need to show them our humanity. Otherwise, this victory means nothing. They'll just come back with an even bigger fleet." Before Rhodes could argue further, Tycho boarded the shuttle, alone. The journey to the Implacable Justice took less than 20 minutes. By rights, the Zelkar flagship should have blasted the unarmed shuttle from space the moment it approached. Instead, against all protocol, Marshal Eric's ordered the bay doors opened. When Lieutenant Mara Tycho stepped onto the deck of the Zelkar command ship, She was immediately surrounded by armed guards, their weapons trained on her, with unwavering precision. She made no threatening moves, standing calmly, until Marshal Eriks himself appeared before her. Up close, the division between his organic and synthetic components was even more pronounced, a physical manifestation of the divide he saw between natural humans and what Hydra had become. "An audacious move," Lieutenant Eriks said, his voice cold. "Coming here alone, unarmed." "Not audacious, Marshal. Necessary. We need to talk human to human." "Is that what you still consider yourself?" There was genuine curiosity beneath the hostility in his voice. "It's what I am," Tycho replied simply. "What we all are. The modifications, the adaptations, they haven't changed our fundamental nature. If anything, they've enhanced what makes us human in the first place, our ability to adapt, to cooperate, to find solutions where none seemed possible." Eric studied her for a long moment. "Yet, you just neutralized 4 capital ships using capabilities no unmodified human possesses. You've developed what amounts to a hive mind. Your soldiers heal from injuries that would kill others. Where does it end, Lieutenant? At what point do you become something else entirely?" "I don't know," Tycho admitted. "But I do know, this trying to destroy us isn't the answer. We're not your enemy, Marshal. We're not a threat to humanity. We're its next step, taken ahead of schedule because of war's necessities." She took a step forward, ignoring the way the guards tensed. "Work with us, not against us. Study what's happening to us, yes, but as partners, not specimens. Let us help you understand the changes instead of fearing them." For what seemed an eternity, Eric stood motionless, his mismatched eyes fixed on Tycho's face. Then slowly, he gestured for the guards to lower their weapons. "You've given me much to consider, Lieutenant. Return to your station. There will be no further hostilities today." It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. The aftermath of the Kestrel Station confrontation reverberated throughout the Alliance. The official report described it as a training exercise that exceeded parameters. But the truth, spread through unofficial channels, Hydra Battalion, outnumbered and outgunned, had forced a standoff with one of the Alliance's most decorated commanders. More importantly, they had done so without taking a single life. In the weeks that followed, Tycho and her officers found themselves summoned to a series of closed meetings with high-ranking officials. The tone had changed dramatically. Instead of suspicion and fear, there was cautious respect, even curiosity about Hydra's capabilities and potential applications. General Harker, who had maintained his silence during the confrontation, now emerged as their most vocal advocate. His research into Hydra's genetic adaptations had convinced him that they represented not a threat, but an opportunity, a chance to understand human potential in ways previously unimagined. "The modifications are stable," he explained during one particularly tense session. "They're not cascading out of control as some had feared. Rather, they seem to be reaching an equilibrium, enhancing natural capabilities, without fundamentally altering what makes these soldiers human." "And the neural network?" someone asked. "The ability to function as a collective consciousness." "A temporary state, voluntarily entered and exited," Harker replied. "Think of it as an extreme form of empathy, not a loss of individuality. Even at the height of connectedness, each soldier maintains their distinct identity and moral framework." Not everyone was convinced. Marshal Eriks, though no longer advocating for Hydra's termination, remained cautious in his assessment. "I've seen the capabilities firsthand," he acknowledged. "But questions remain about long-term implications. Can these adaptations be passed to offspring? Will they continue to evolve? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when the war ends? What place will these enhanced soldiers have in a peaceful society?" These were questions without easy answers, questions that Tycho herself wrestled with during sleepless nights. Hydra Battalion had been created for war, their capabilities honed by conflict. What would become of them, of her, when that purpose no longer existed? The answer, when it came, was unexpected. 12 weeks after Kestrel Station, Tycho was summoned to a private meeting with Admiral Roth and General Harker. No aides, no recording devices, no official agenda. "We've been authorized to offer you a choice, Lieutenant," Roth began without preamble. "Two paths forward for Hydra Battalion." Harker took up the thread. "The first option is full integration into the Alliance military structure. Your troops would be dispersed among existing units, as training officers sharing their tactical innovations, while being studied to better understand their adaptations." "And the second option?" Tycho asked, already suspecting she wouldn't like it. "Expansion," Roth said. "We use what we've learned from Hydra to create more enhanced units. Not through the haphazard methods that created your battalion, but through controlled, targeted modifications applied to volunteers." "Mass production," Tycho said flatly. "You want to turn what happened to us into a template." "We want to save lives," Harker corrected. "The adaptations your soldiers have developed could protect thousands of troops from environmental hazards, biological weapons combat injuries. It could revolutionize not just warfare, but medicine, space, exploration, disaster response." Tycho sat in silence for several minutes, weighing the implications. Both options felt wrong: dismantling the unit that had become a family, or using their involuntary transformations as a blueprint for altering others. "There's a third option," she said finally. "One that respects what Hydra has become while acknowledging our responsibilities to the Alliance and to humanity's future." The proposal she outlined was bold. Hydra would remain intact as a specialized response unit, deployed only in the most challenging circumstances, where their unique capabilities were essential. Simultaneously, they would participate in carefully structured research programs, helping scientists understand the mechanisms behind their adaptations without becoming mere test subjects. Most controversially, she proposed that Hydra itself should have a voice in how their genetic information was used, going forward a level of autonomy unprecedented for military personnel. "Your soldiers are still Alliance troops, Lieutenant," Roth reminded her. "Under military authority and discipline." "Yes, sir. But they're also the first of what might be humanity's next evolutionary step. That carries moral weight that goes beyond the chain of command." The debate continued for hours, growing increasingly heated, as fundamental questions of authority ethics and human identity collided. In the end, no firm resolution was reached, but the fact that the conversation happened at all represented a seismic shift in how Hydra was perceived. 6 months later, Hydra Battalion remained intact, now officially redesignated as the Adaptive Response Task Force. Their deployments were fewer, but more strategic, focusing on situations where conventional forces faced insurmountable obstacles. Research into their unique capabilities continued, but under strict ethical guidelines developed with input from the soldiers themselves. Each new discovery brought both excitement and apprehension, revelations about human potential, balanced against concerns about unintended consequences. Lieutenant Tycho, promoted to captain for her exceptional leadership under extraordinary circumstances, found herself increasingly involved in policy discussions that would shape not just Hydra's future, but potentially humanity's. It was a responsibility she had never sought, but now embraced with the same adaptability that characterized her battalion. The Zelkar threat eventually receded, pushed back by a combination of conventional forces and strategic deployments of Hydra teams. Peace, or something approximating it, settled over Alliance space. But on the outer edges of explored territory where strange phenomena defied explanation and unknown civilizations waited to be encountered, new challenges emerged, challenges that required not just strength or technology, but the unique adaptability that only Hydra possessed. And so they continued, these extraordinary soldiers who remained fundamentally human, despite, or perhaps because of their evolution. They moved through the galaxy like living legends, their very existence a reminder that humanity's greatest strength had always been its capacity to change, to grow, to become more than it had been before. On distant outposts and hostile worlds in situations where hope seemed lost and survival impossible, the arrival of Hydra brought something beyond tactical advantage. It brought a promise written in the adapted genes of 150 soldiers who had never asked to be exceptional, that whatever challenges the universe presented, humanity would adapt and survive. Marshal Eric's watching from the command center, as Hydra's ships departed for yet another impossible mission, found himself thinking of ancient Earth myths of monsters and gods of beings caught between worlds. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his gut when he thought about what Hydra might yet become. But alongside it grew something new, a grudging pride in what human ingenuity and resilience had accomplished, even when pushed to extremes. Hydra Battalion wasn't just a military unit anymore. They were pioneers crossing boundaries between what humans had been and what they might become. The journey had only just begun.